guys, my name is Joy from Standard Digital and I'm here with Omoro from DIB Bank.
It's a pleasure to have you, Joy. As Joy has said, my name is Omoro, CEO, DIB Bank Kenya. It's been a pleasure hosting the community today on our morning chat, talking about the pathways to home ownership.
Yes, so Dan has been live on Kenya Bankers Association's CEO chat, and he's just been giving a lot of advice to young Kenyans about home ownership and how you can actually go about home ownership. Dan, tell us, from the many engagements you had online, what was the feeling you had today, and what sense did you get from the people who were chatting today?
It was quite an honor to chat to the community. Of course, experiencing real time some of the challenges that Kenyans go through in their quest to home owns. Similarly, also the opportunities that are available out there to own homes, and probably the obstacles that they face in the process of owning homes. So of course we went through a lot of channels available for home ownership. Key among them is the mortgage, which banks provide to customers, and probably to debunk the myth that it's only employed people who get mortgages. Mortgages in the banking industry is available to all people so long as they have an income. The income could be through employment, or the income could be through business that you're running. You would be able to qualify for a mortgage. Of course, for those that may not have access to mortgages, we also talked about other channels like the SACCO movement, which is big in this country, where you use your savings in the SACCO and also get guarantees from your friends within the same SACCO to be able to get funded, to get what would use as probably for paying down payment if you want to buy a house, or even for buying a plot that you then use to develop. And banks give construction financing if you have a piece of land which is vacant and it is in the allocation that the bank would feel comfortable to finance. You would be able to get financing from most banks to construct a house in that facility. So there are quite a number of avenues available for Kenyans to own homes.
One interesting thing that you said during the chat is that the fact that we have about 25,000 mortgages in Kenya should not mean that we have very low home ownership in Kenya. Maybe you could expand a little bit on that.
Yes, thanks, Joy. Definitely there is a bit of a misconception, because as I indicated during the chat, the process around getting a mortgage sometimes can be lengthy and expensive. This is because there's so many stakeholders involved, which would be the financiers, it would be government bodies like the land registries, there is lawyers involved, there are valuers involved. So sometimes it becomes expensive and lengthy, which discourages most people from going the mortgage route. For me, the statistics that would be a more appropriate measure in terms of the uptake of mortgages in the country is home ownership, because many people, as I said, use those other channels to own homes, and quite a number of Kenyans own homes. So that would be probably the appropriate yardstick to use in determining Kenyans that own their homes.
Own their homes. Now, when it came to the aspect of building homes, you talked about different ways that some people do it gradually. I remember one of the people in the chat said he was a young father and he wanted to, now think about getting a home for his family. And I'd like you to expound to Kenyans what you mean by gradual, because some of them maybe at this particular age are not earning, the hundreds of thousands that would enable them to get the high value facilities. Maybe you could walk them through that.
Yes. So what I talk to the community, particularly those who are young, probably the biggest advantage they have is age on their side. Most mortgages in this market go for repayment periods of up to 25 years. Now you will understand that the longer the repayment period, the lower the installments you will need to pay every month, which becomes affordable for most people who are young if you take the mortgage now. So for those that are young and starting off in life, starting their families, my encouragement would be for you to start now and make sure that you use your age to your advantage. Of course, there are some banks that would actually extend that repayment up to your retirement period. So if, for instance, you're like the gentleman that asked about what he can do is 25 years, he's got 35 years to retirement. That is a huge advantage he's got. There are some financials that will be willing to give him a facility for repayment of up to that period of time. Now, again, many times people want to start big. If you're young, probably your income is still low, you can't afford a big house, probably you want it in some address which is out of reach for now. Start where you can afford. Start small, then grow big. It could be a one-bedroom house, it could even be a bed-sitter. It may not be at the right address where you eventually want to settle, but you got to start somewhere. My encouragement is please start where you can afford. That property would help you, you would leverage on that property in future to help you, move gradually towards where you'd like to eventually settle in life.
Now that you've talked about affordability, one of the people on the chat kind of pointed out that sometimes it's very expensive to purchase homes, and sometimes the cost is actually based on the inputs. Maybe you could explain that.
Yes, it's expensive, and as I said, there are various or different costs related to purchasing a home. Of course, the first one is the cost of the property itself, which many times goes to the developers. Then besides that, of course, the other costs that are associated with purchasing a home. As I said, you will have to pay a certain fiscal expenses. This is what you will pay to the government in form of stamp duty. Ranges between 2 to 4% of the value of the property, depending on the location. And these are things that are prescribed in law by the government, so they have to be met. And of course, it means there will be also lawyers involved, because you must have legal charge on the property. You must have the charge registered with the registry of lands. So those processes do increase the cost of owning a home. Of course, as a bank, there will be evaluation report required, so valuers will also be involved. So all of these add up to the cost of a home. Now, banks, a number of banks work with customers, and you'll find that some banks even offer 105% financing for certain property, so that they help you also meet the cost of these other service providers like lawyers, like valuers, like stamp duty, just to make it easy and accessible to as many Kenyans as possible.
Now, an interesting question came here from a guy called Judo. He asked, what are the pros and cons of deciding to build a house versus buying a already complete house?
Probably most people would prefer to build their own homes, because perhaps it would cut off certain costs associated with going through developers, because developers have to add in their margins on the property. And you'd also appreciate that developers also use other service providers to come up with these homes. So in the end, it would appear that the homes are expensive. But my view would be a little different. There are challenges in trying to do what you're not an expert in. So if you're not a contractor yourself, you're not qualified in building and construction. A lot of people have either ended up with substandard property because they try to cut corners. It's always advisable that you use professionals who will ensure that the end product is of good quality, because this is a lifetime investment. It's best that you spend a little bit more, but the quality of the product is guaranteed. So that really for me would be the advice I would give such people.
One of the questions that came through the chat, and I've also seen someone talk about it on Twitter, is the aspect about the cap.
For me, the statistics that would be a more appropriate measure in terms of the uptake of mortgages in the country is home ownership, because many people, as I said, use those other channels to own homes, and quite a number of Kenyans own homes. So that would be probably the appropriate yardstick to use in determining Kenyans that own their homes.
Own their homes. Now, when it came to the aspect of building homes, you talked about different ways that some people do it gradually. I remember one of the people in the chat said he was a young father and he wanted to, now think about getting a home for his family. And I'd like you to expound to Kenyans what you mean by gradual, because some of them maybe at this particular age are not earning, the hundreds of thousands and could enable them to get the high value facilities. Maybe you could walk them through that.
Yes. So what I talk to the community, particularly those who are young, probably the biggest advantage they have is age on their side. Most mortgages in this market go for repayment periods of up to 25 years. Now you will understand that the longer the repayment period, the lower the installments you will need to pay every month, which becomes affordable for most people who are young if you take the mortgage now. So for those that are young and starting off in life, starting their families, my encouragement would be for you to start now and make sure that you use your age to your advantage. Of course, there are some banks that would actually extend that repayment up to your retirement period. So if, for instance, you're like the gentleman that asked about what he can do is 25 years, he's got 35 years to retirement. That is a huge advantage he's got. There are some financials that will be willing to give him a facility for repayment of up to that period of time. Now, again, many times people want to start big. If you're young, probably your income is still low, you can't afford a big house, probably you want it in some address which is out of reach for now. Start where you can afford. Start small, then grow big. It could be a one-bedroom house, it could even be a bed-sitter. It may not be at the right address where you eventually want to settle, but you got to start somewhere. My encouragement is please start where you can afford. That property would help you, you would leverage on that property in future to help you, move gradually towards where you'd like to eventually settle in life.
Now that you talked about affordability, one of the people in the chat kind of pointed out that sometimes it's very expensive to purchase homes, and sometimes the cost is actually based on the inputs. Maybe you could explain that.
Yes, it's expensive, and as I said, there are various or different costs related to purchasing a home. Of course, the first one is the cost of the property itself, which many times goes to the developers. Then besides that, of course, the other costs that are associated with purchasing a home. As I said, you will have to pay a certain fiscal expenses. This is what you will pay to the government in form of stamp duty. Ranges between 2 to 4% of the value of the property, depending on the location. And these are things that are prescribed in law by the government, so they have to be met. And of course, it means there will be also lawyers involved, because you must have legal charge on the property. You must have the charge registered with the registry of land. So those processes do increase the cost of owning a home. Of course, as a bank, there will be evaluation report required, so valuers will also be involved. So all of these add up to the cost of a home. Now, banks, a number of banks work with customers, and you'll find that some banks even offer 105% financing for certain property, so that they help you also meet the cost of these other service providers like lawyers, like valuers, like stamp duty, just to make it easy and accessible to as many Kenyans as possible. So my consideration would be, it would be the best interest of this economy for this law to be reviewed to ensure that, one, there is protection for consumers, because again, banks must be responsible financiers, so that Kenyans are not taken advantage of, but the pricing needs to be in line with the risks and the costs that are associated with financing such facilities.
All right, so one of the things I'd like to also touch on that came up in the conversation that we had was the aspect of end-to-end services. Because as you said, because of the way the sector is structured, there's so many other costs that come along with it. And banks have tried by giving even in excess of the cost of the home. But what happens now in terms of helping people who might not necessarily, well, maybe abroad, or do not necessarily know how to go about the housing market? How are bankers in the industry solving this problem?
Yes, so banks have partnered with the players within the sector, the housing sector, So you'll find that banks have signed agreements with developers. These are vetted, and these are qualified developers to help customers, experience a fairly smooth process when they're acquiring homes. Otherwise, you'd find that as a customer, you'd have to deal with a bank, deal with a valuer, deal with a lawyer, go to deal with the registries in the different councils or cities, deal with quite a host of service providers along this chain. So what banks have done is that they made this a one-stop shop. So when you walk into your bank, you will sign all the documentations that will be used by all of these service providers, and they do your evaluation. If you qualify, then the bank will be able to, handle these processes that involve so many stakeholders on behalf of the customer. So make it very easy. We know people are very busy, engaged in their businesses or employment, and it's very difficult to get time to run from one office to another to process these applications. So banks make it easy for people to do that. Secondly, for people in the diaspora, we know that many times they have used channels which have ended up losing money. Now, this makes it very easy for Kenyans in diaspora because you're dealing with a bank and you're dealing with a developer that is vetted, and therefore it helps them manage that risk of losing their hard-earned savings and investments through unscrupulous individuals that some people have trusted and lost money in the process.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because even when we looked at in May this year, the CBK actually noted that we had the highest remittances from the diaspora, and a lot of it was actually going towards us. So it actually shows that the banks are actually responding to a need, because a lot of people in the diaspora are complaining about they want to invest back home, they want to have investments back home, but there was challenges along that. Being a new bank in the sector, one of the facilities that you offer is Sharia mortgages. How does Sharia mortgages, just in general, because I know we can't go deep into it, how does it differ from the other kind of mortgages that are available in the market? Okay.
So the key or underlying principle in Sharia banking is investment, and the bank connects those that have funds with those that have projects that need to be invested. So in Sharia banking, we don't give out loans. We invest with the investors in projects. So the key difference, depending on the structure that is used, is where the bank would co-own a project. In this case, if it's a mortgage, a house with a customer. This would be long-term in nature. So the customer will then be buying off the bank's share from this house over a period of time, up to the point where full ownership is bestowed to the customer. If it is a short-dated one, you would find that the bank would buy the property and then sell it to the customer. Yes.
I'm sure if they have a lot more questions, they could link up with you and ask a lot of questions about that.
Definitely, and we invite them to engage with us through our website, or if they can come to our branches. We have 3 branches in Kenya. One is in Upper Hill, where we have the head office. One is in Westlands at Goodman Towers, and we have one in Mombasa, in Kilindini. But you can also go to our website at www.dibkenya.co.ke.
All right, we have to wind it up because of time. Next time, I think we'll have an article and we'll post a little bit about this, and you can actually watch a video online. So thank you very much, Dan, for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Much appreciated.